After that, we see a new couple emerging, as they even walk hand in hand down the street. The next day, Pyonghwa once again has to deal with that commander who keeps bothering her, and now, the man is on her case because he saw her arriving with Rowoon. For some reason, he feels entitled to question whether the two are together and even asks if the commissioner knows about what happened between them. However, Pyonghwa stands her ground and responds that none of this is any of his business, which results in him once again threatening to reveal some secret of theirs to the rest of the team. When the situation starts to get tense, with Pyonghwa continuing to defend herself by questioning whether the commander's wife knows about his obsession with her, Rowoon walks through the curtain. The commissioner immediately notices Pyonghwa's discomfort and senses something is wrong, so after the commander leaves, Rowoon tells his colleague that if she is facing any problems, she can call on him. Meanwhile, Sarang is doing her job at the Royal Smile when she encounters her former superior. The woman is there to deliver some clothes sent by someone higher up, and once again, she shows envy towards the protagonist, emphasizing that Sarang only reached the top level of hotel staff by luck. However, the woman didn't count on Mrs. Jong being nearby and overhearing everything, so before she could return to her duties, the protagonist's current superior made it clear that Sarang reached this position through her own merit and constant dedication. Later, we move on to the matter of the clothes sent by Waran. It turns out that because the hotel saved Sarang, the woman wants to give an interview to the press to take advantage of the public's positive comments, even though she wasn't the one who carried out the rescue. Of course, there was a script to follow, but knowing the truth and how much Gu-won risked to help her, Sarang decided to speak about what really happened in front of everyone, leaving Waran furious. But in compensation, Gu-won, who had just learned about the press conference and rushed to the location, knew that in the end, his beloved would do the right thing. In the next scene, we see that Waran found out she was losing the race to host an Arab prince named Samir. So, accepting that all her attempts to convince him to stay at the King Hotel failed, when she had a meeting with the board and the president, Waran passed the responsibility to Gu-won, with the goal of having her brother fail and show their father that he is not competent to manage even the Royal Smile, let alone the hotel. Meanwhile, Sarang, who already had a stressful day, had to clean the VIP lounge alone after a banquet because her colleagues were envious that she was called by Waran and left all the heavy work to the protagonist. When Sarang was almost done, Gu-won appeared and invited her for coffee, but since there was still work to be done, the man decided to help her finish faster. Moving on to Deul, we see her team having dinner with Ra-hee, who is responsible for coordinating whether sales in a certain region are going well. Since Waran passed the order that the stores must double their profits, Ra-hee relays this to the team, but with an even higher percentage than they had received. Deul tried to explain that the employees aren't even taking breaks to meet what was previously established, but Ra-hee had a trick up her sleeve and promised that if they succeed, they will all go on a 6-day trip to Southeast Asia, which obviously excites Deul's employees. However, for this to happen, they won't be able to take breaks during work hours anymore. Returning to Sarang, we see her serving the president and 2 of his friends. During the conversation, the owner, who is a direct competitor of the president, boasts that Prince Samir will stay at his hotel. However, soon after, the president receives news that Gu-won managed to convince the man to go to the King Hotel. To outshine his competitor, the president announces in front of everyone that the protagonist will be the one to welcome the prince, as she is the best employee. Going back a bit to the previous night, we see that Gu-won managed to convince Samir because he already had a certain familiarity with the prince. It turns out that the two studied together for a few years, but the men kind of hate each other, and to convince him to accept, Gu-won promised to say only yes to Samir. Since the prince's arrival, Gu-won has already started to get annoyed, but things got worse when he realized that Samir liked Sarang and kept complimenting her. The prince even invited her to lunch during her shift, and since the protagonist was assigned to take care of him, she couldn't refuse. Once again, this resulted in Sarang's colleagues becoming jealous of her. Later, We see that while waiting for the prince to finish a meeting, Gu-won asked the protagonist for help on how he should behave to please Samir and make him leave soon, so Sarang taught him to smile like a royal smile employee. After the prince finished his negotiations, which was the real reason he came to the country, we see that Samir decided everyone should go to a palace where some kings lived during the dynasty. Several times, the prince made it clear that he was interested in the protagonist. He even asked them to dress traditionally to participate in a mock wedding ceremony at the temple. However, instead of Samir dressing as the king, Gu-won was quicker, so when the prince entered the temple, he was furious to find the man in his place. In the next scene, we move to when Gu-won and the protagonist are enjoying delicious instant food to relax after a tiring day, and at this point, the two are getting closer and closer, almost becoming a couple. Meanwhile, Deol struggles to keep the house after an exhausting day of work, and when she goes out to take out the trash, even though it's her husband's job, we see that her daughter seems to have more sense than the man, as the girl comments to her father that she will never marry someone like him. The next day, Sarang received a gift from the prince during her work hours, and he asked her to wear it to the party that would be held that night. Moving on to the party, we see that it was prepared in the Royal Smile Lounge, but since the protagonist previously felt uncomfortable having her colleague serve her, this time Gu-won dressed as a butler, on Samir's orders, and it was more of a dinner than a party. The prince's intention was to propose to Sarang during the meal, and when he did, even I was surprised. Of course, Gu-won freaked out when he saw the beautiful and large ring the protagonist received, but before the man could drag her out of the lounge, Sarang asked him to let her handle it, and with great politeness and kindness, the protagonist declined the prince's proposal. In the end, she even managed to convince him to let Gu-won have dinner with them, and the night ended better than they imagined. The next day, Samir leaves the country with a very friendly farewell from Sarang and Gu-won. For Pyonghwa, the day doesn't start off easy. While delivering customers' purchases, she ends up getting injured in the cabin as the plane starts to land, and at night, Ro-woon has to help her get home. The protagonist is excited to see that there is a man interested in Pyonghwa, especially someone as attentive as Ro-woon. To help her friend boost sales with the aim of getting a promotion, the next day the three best friends go to a spa and discreetly start promoting the product catalog that Pyonghwa sells as an employee, which works very well. Meanwhile, Gu-won seems to have finally woken up to the competition for the hotel with his sister, and during a dinner with their father, he mentions that he would like to take care of the King Hotel's 100th anniversary, which removes Waran from the role and leaves her furious. Later, Gu-won meets with the protagonist at the spa because he wants to tell his beloved something very important, and since Sarang is with her friends, he ends up spending time with all of them first. Thus, even Gu-won joins in the sales pitch so that Pyonghwa can get the promotion. After taking a break from the sales pitch, Sarang's friends take advantage of her distraction to talk to Gu-won and comment that if he really likes her, he should confess, because the prince keeps calling Sarang every night. Thus, on the weekend, Gu-won invites the protagonist for dinner and prepares delicious meals for her. However, before he can talk about his feelings, an accident happens in the kitchen, and the fire alarms go off, soaking the whole place. What could have been a disaster turns into a beautiful moment between the couple, and they finally have their first kiss. The next day, we see that Pyonghwa came in first place in sales and brought her team to the top, but the promotion her superior had promised did not go to her but to her colleague. This surprises everyone, but especially Ro-woon, who witnessed his beloved's hard work and now sees her devastated. So later, he makes an effort to make her feel better. After that wonderful night, Gu-won now wants to be near Sarang all the time, so he brings his work to the Royal Smile Lounge. Since it's not usual for him to spend so much time there, the protagonist's team begins to suspect they are doing something wrong. Thus, Sarang has to ask Gu-won to leave, and he feels a bit hurt by this. Later, we see that the protagonist starts getting a bit closer to her teammates after helping one who didn't quite understand a foreign customer's question, and surprisingly, the man thanks her afterward. Meanwhile, in a meeting with the president, after Hwaran repeatedly corners him for simply not knowing what Gu-won is planning for the hotel's anniversary, the man decides to ask his father to let him fully manage the King Hotel from now on. This is obviously seen as an affront to Hwaran, but the president agrees to grant him the branch if Gu-won does well in this celebration. As soon as this important meeting ends, Sarang and Gu-won decide to talk because the man continues to be moody, but since he crosses the line a bit by dodging her hug, now the protagonist is angry. Focusing on Hwaran, we see that she has already started moving to not lose the hotel, so even though she is not involved in organizing the 100th anniversary, Hwaran sends her assistant to send invitations to those who will side with her in the competition for the King group. Meanwhile, Gu-won makes a surprise visit to Sarang's grandmother, and fortunately, he is there because when he enters the restaurant, he has time to prevent her from falling to the ground after losing her balance on top of a table. In the next scene, we see that soon he is taken to the hospital, but the lady doesn't really want to stay there. Anyway, Gu-won takes the opportunity to have the doctors make a list of exams for Soon-hee, so suspecting the man's intentions, the lady understands that he likes her granddaughter. Thus, Soon-hee gives some relationship advice to Gu-won and then comments that she will allow him to enter the line of husbands she herself created for the protagonist. Then, Sarang arrives desperately at the hospital room and cries when she sees her grandmother because the woman confesses that she won't know what to do if she ever loses her. After the mood calms down, the protagonist goes to Soon-hee's restaurant as she promised the lady to arrange some things for when she is discharged the next day, and being attentive, Gu-won chooses to stay and help his beloved. At the end of the night, the man sleeps at the place because unfortunately, they ended up messing up the restaurant's power while trying to turn off the light switch to change a bulb, which obviously didn't work, and to not leave the protagonist alone, he chose to stay. And the two slept on separate futons, but next to each other. Which was a surprise the next morning for Sarang's grandmother, who arrived at the place quietly and caught them together. Soon he doesn't seem like she was just discharged from the hospital and immediately goes to hit Gu-won. Then we see that she takes him for a walk so they can talk without Sarang around, but along the way, Soon he stops when she meets her neighbors who obviously compare Gu-won to who they think is more suitable for the protagonist. Soon after, the duo arrives at the place the lady wanted, and she takes Gu-won to a place where savings accounts are opened. Soon he opens a savings account for real estate and deposits an amount, choosing to put it in Gu-won's name and agreeing that in the coming months, the man should feed the account, thus ensuring a good future for her granddaughter and the potential husband. The lady does this because she is one of the people who doesn't know about the fortune Gu-won carries, and anyway, the man feels very cherished seeing that Soon-hee is also taking care of him in a way. Later, her granddaughter also notices how much the lady likes Gu-won just by observing how she behaves with him. In the next scene, Gu-won hasn't been released to go home yet because when he was dropping Sarang off at her residence, the protagonist's friends invited him in. Pyonghwa and Deul bought a lot of drinks because, besides the flight attendant not receiving the promotion, she is still a stewardess. Deul also didn't get the promised 6-day trip, but rather a tiring and non-relaxing round trip to a beach. Gu-won is surprised by the reports and even more so when he discovers that the so-called best employee title for Sarang only earned her a pin and nothing more. Hearing all these things makes Gu-won open his eyes a bit more to how much the employees strive and are not rewarded, so the man decides to change some things in the company and also uses his power to give his beloved's friends, including her, a nice trip to Thailand. But it doesn't stop there, because as soon as they return, there will be a rotation so that all deserving employees are rewarded with these wonderful little vacations. From the moment he asked Sang-sik to organize the trip, the man started acting a bit strange with Gu-won, and when the day came for him to embark with the girls, Gu-won understood the reason. Sang-sik declared himself the best secretary of the King group, thus including himself in the adventure, meaning that since Gu-won had borrowed his friend's name to introduce himself to Sarang's friends at the beginning, for a few days, Sang-sik will have to pretend to be the chief manager. What did you think of these episodes? I hope you enjoyed the summary. Leave your suggestions in the comments and subscribe. If you liked the video, like and share to help me out. See you next time.